Welcome to Third Eyesight. I'm your host, Juan Francisco, and I'm a spiritual intuitive who practices tarot card reading and mediumship. I've always been super curious about the supernatural and paranormal, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories. Let's get to it. We have Ferny Marron, a psychic medium and spiritual teacher on Third Eyesight with us today. Ferny, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here and very honored that you asked me to be your guest.
Well, I'm honored to have you as a guest. I'm so excited. So to start off with, tell us what you do. What's your passion in life's work?
So I am a professional psychic medium and spiritual teacher, and my passion is to essentially teach people about their own intuition, help them to reveal that inner sense of guidance that is a part of our inner workings. In other words, trying to tap into that potential within each of us. Because for me, psychic ability, being able to connect with our loved ones in spirit, it is a part of us as human beings, and everybody has this idea about it. So my focus is to try to break those ideas and kind of jump in there and say, hey guys, you all can do this too. And not just by telling people, but also exemplifying how it works and what they can do to help themselves as well.
And for how long have you been doing this as a business with clients?
Yeah, as a business, I think the year that I started as a business was in 2014. It was actually, I remember the year, that was the year, I believe my friend passed away. So it was at the end of the year. And it was in the beginning of that year where I tried to begin doing this as a full-time business. I was actually still a Starbucks manager. So I was doing that full-time. And that's a lot of work. If anybody out there who's ever been in management, Starbucks is a lot of work. And when you have a team and so forth. So I was doing it. I was doing that. And then I was doing my business. And that's when I started doing it full-time.
And going back to what you said about how you believe, and I agree with this, that we all have a certain level of intuition or the ability to connect with our loved ones on the other side. I've heard the phrase like natural medium, which some people say like natural born medium. So what is your feeling about, like, are some people born with stronger abilities, or some people, what's your opinion? There's a lot of opinions out there about you're naturally born medium or not.
Yeah. Everybody has this ability. That is just, I mean, I've taught so many people how to do this and to do it well, that I've seen no limitation to that other than the limitation that they place on themselves. So when it comes to being a psychic or communicating with those who are in spirit form and sensing information, picking up on energy, we are all designed to do so. The problem is that most people fall into the category of believing what they hear, either from their families about what this is, or they believe the hype on TV with movies and shows that don't really show you how this actually works. So people get caught up in all of that, and they believe that, oh, well, you have to be this unique individual, or you have to be born special. Some people are born naturally more sensitive, but if you don't use it or practice that skill, it's really not going to go anywhere. You can be as special as you want to be, but it's not going to take you anywhere. Some people have incredible singing ability, but if they're not spending a few hours a day practicing it, it's not really going to go anywhere. So some of us are born more sensitive, myself included, because I definitely think that's the case in my situation. But I've taught people who were not born that sensitive and are actually very disconnected from their emotional and energetic centers, and they still are able to build us up and turn this into something.
Yeah, conditioning, the way we're conditioned plays a big role, whether it's by pop culture, religion, and pop culture telling us that mediums are like ghost whisper or like always like TLC shows, or religion telling us that we can't do it, we shouldn't do it. So a lot plays into that for sure. And I couldn't agree more with what you said. Along the lines of that, you've shared on your website, I've read your bio, and I saw some stories in there about your childhood and how you had experiences from infancy, really. Could you share a little bit about that and what that was like? It sounds like you know these stories based on what relatives told you. So I would love to hear what they shared with you and what you remember experiencing yourself.
Yeah, I think as a kid, as a toddler, I mean, one of the first stories that I was told about, my mom actually is the one who told me about this, was she was doing some chores or some things in the kitchen, and she heard me laughing. And I think I was less than a year old, and I was in the crib and I was laughing and giggling, and no one else was there. So she heard me giggling and laughing, and was wondering what was going on, and she decided to check on me. And as she walked into the bedroom where the crib was at, she saw my grandmother, who had passed away many years prior, standing next to my crib, and she was bathed in white light. She was wearing a pink dress, and she was just smiling at me, and I was looking up at her and smiling back. And then she turned to my mother and said, take care of him. I'm going to send an angel to help you. And that was it. And then she just disappeared. And my mother was just, flabbergasted and just shocked because she was caught off guard. She didn't expect that to happen. I don't remember that. I was too little. But years later, my cousin Monica, she was my babysitter. So I used to spend a lot of time over at their house, and they had this kind of a very ornate Victorian style chair. And what she told me was that I used to have this imaginary friend. He had a name. I don't remember any of that either, but I used to spend a lot of time just laughing and talking to myself, giggling at the wall. And then she said there would always be this man who would sit in this chair, and I would sit there and I would just watch him and listen to him. And she didn't know what was going on because sometimes there was no conversation. It was like I was just listening intently, as if I were being told or given information, and just paying attention to what was being given. So I was like, that's interesting. The first conscious experience I remember having wasn't until my teenage years. And that was when I almost died in a fire in my home, where it started with me questioning this because I'd never really known a lot about psychic abilities or the ability to sense things, and mediumship. Didn't know any of that. But I remember watching a show called Star Trek Voyager, and on the show, there was a character named Cass who had these abilities. She could telepathically communicate, and she could move things with her mind. And I thought that was pretty awesome and cool and incredible, actually. And I just started to wonder, like, what are we capable of? What is possible for us? Because the way that the angle that they came from was this angle that every race of beings, her race specifically, had this ability, and they had lost it over time. And she had rediscovered these abilities because she left her home world and she started to explore herself as a person, and in the process these abilities came forward. And I thought to myself, I wonder if the same thing has happened for us. I wonder if we've also gone through the same thing, if we've lost abilities and if we're capable of more. So in that week of asking, just pondering and wondering if that was possible, or if we could have additional abilities besides what we were aware of, that's when my first psychic experiences really started to happen. And I remember the very first one. I used to go to the kitchen a lot because, as a Hispanic kid, you get the munchies and you want to go. And I was pretty heavy, actually. I was a pretty thick kid. And I used to go to the kitchen like every few hours to check and see something to eat, what's going on.
Me too.
And
Oreos at 2
yep.
a.m. Yep.
Yeah. And I was walking into the kitchen to find something to eat. And as I was walking into the room, in my mind, I heard a voice, but it wasn't like a disembodied voice that was different than my own. It's like when you're in your mind and you're thinking about something. It's your voice. It's your inner voice, but it's your voice. It's just, thinking. And so I heard my voice, but it was different. It didn't sound like me, but it was my voice. It didn't feel like me. It was calmer, more authoritative, but not aggressive. And it posed a question. It just posed it and just almost as if it was a suggestion. Hey, what would you do if there was a kitchen fire? How would you handle that kind of situation? And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. Didn't even think about the voice or thought that was weird. I just thought I was thinking this out. And in that moment, I started to wonder, okay, what would I do if there was a kitchen fire? So I decided to come up with a strategy and a plan of action. I was like, okay, this is what I would do, because the house that we lived in, it had burglar bars on all of the windows and on the extra door. But there was only one way in and out that we used on a regular basis, which was the kitchen door. So if there was a fire, I would be trapped in that house unless I was able to get out through that kitchen door. So I said, okay, I don't want the house to burn down, and I definitely don't want to get stuck in the house or trapped here. So I came up with a plan. I said, well, if I get up to if there's a fire on the stove and it, looks this way, then I'm going to walk into the kitchen, hold my breath, walk straight ahead, because that's where the sink is at, grab the water hose out of the sink and then spray down the fire. And then as I'm still holding my breath, go out through that kitchen door, because I put out the fire, and then hopefully I can get out in time to breathe and get some oxygen in. So that was my plan. So every day for almost 2 weeks, I repeated that plan. Every time I went into the kitchen looking for a snack, I just repeated it like clockwork. And at the end of 2 weeks, my mom was working at the time. She was at her job. And I was by myself. I used to make, cook for myself. I was making pancakes that morning. And the stove that we had was a hand me down that one of my uncles had given to us because he had upgraded all of his kitchen appliances. And it was not the easiest stove to use. Some of the knobs wouldn't really align properly. So and it was an electric stove. So if you turned it on, you had to kind of adjust it just right to get the coils to heat up. And then to turn it off, you had to put your hand over the coils to see if it was continuing to provide heat. And if it didn't, then it was off. So that's the way we went. It's kind of, scary to think about it at this point. But there was also a fire alarm on the top of the ceiling next to the stove, which somebody thought that was a great idea to put a fire detector, a smoke detector, but that's where it was. So every time we cooked, every time we made anything, it would go off. And it was one of those sounds where you just get used to it because you're not going to get up there and pull it down every single time. So as I was leaving the kitchen, I turned it off. I'd move the pan over and I turned off the stove, checked to make sure everything was good. Took my food, went to my bedroom. And that was back in the, Saturday morning cartoon days where you wake up early, you watch your Saturday morning cartoons, gummy bears, whatever's on TV. And I was eating my pancakes, watching TV, and the alarm was still going, didn't think anything of it. And then a few seconds later, I'm hearing that voice again that I heard 2 weeks prior, which was my same voice, but just more authoritative, and said, Ferny, Fernando, go to the kitchen. And I thought to myself, well, why should I go to and I'm asking myself, I'm starting to have a dialogue with this voice. Why should I go to the kitchen? And then nothing, just it repeats itself. Fernando, go to the kitchen. But this time it was a little louder, a little more insistent, kind of like more pressure. And I said, no, I don't want to get up. I'm late. I want to watch TV. Like I want to watch cartoons. And then third time, Fernando, like just solid. Fernando, go to the kitchen. And at that point, I was like, fine, fine. And it became like this obsessive feeling, like when you think you haven't locked your door and you've left home, you're like, maybe I should go back because it starts to bug you. So it bugged me and I got up. I'm like, fine, I'll go to the kitchen. So I got up, walked over at that time, my bedroom was connected to a bathroom, which was connected to my mother's bedroom, which then led to the kitchen. Kind of a weird layout, but that's the way it was. So I decided, okay, let me go. So I walked through the bathroom into my mom's bedroom. And as I was walking into the bedroom, right then and there, I could see the smoke billowing out of the kitchen doorway and the light flashing into the smoke. And it was dark, billowy smoke. And I was like, immediately I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And so I was caught off guard because I wasn't expecting that, even though I'd spent 2 weeks practicing this, right? But I wasn't expecting to actually see that. So as soon as I ran up to the door, I saw it then and there, exactly what I had seen in my mind 2 weeks prior.
Wow.
And in the moment, yeah. So in the moment, like you're caught off guard, right? Because you're like, what do I do? What do I do? And immediately my thoughts like lined up, and you've been practicing for this, you know what to do it. And so immediately I did exactly what I'd been trained for, and I took my breath, went up to the sink, pulled out the hose, sprayed it down. It was a grease fire, so I'm surprised it even went out because you're not supposed to spray water on a grease fire, but it went out. And then I went out through the back door, and I was like outside just in complete shock and like, what just happened? And I was freaked out, but it was enough to get me to realize there was way more going on behind the scenes in this situation than what I realized. And that was the first real eye-opening experience that I had.
Wow. And you said you were 13 when this happened?
Yeah, I was around 12 or 13. Yeah, I was around 12. I was still in my early teens when this happened.
Because I'm 30. I think I would have screamed like I was a lady in church. I don't know. I think I would freak out. But the difference is spirit, the universe, source prepared you for that. And that's just, so was that the first time you realized that you could predict things, or that the universe was helping you to predict things?
No, the concept of universe, I was raised Catholic. I was still very much a part of the Catholic tradition at that time. And so for myself, the idea, the term universe didn't even exist. To be honest, it wasn't a mainstream concept. The idea of psychic phenomena and psychic ability was, for me, was not a known thing. It was just what I had seen on Star Trek, and then what just happened. And then after that, other things started to occur. I think like a few weeks after that, I had some family members over, and again, I was in my bedroom, and my aunt and my cousin were there, and my mom was. She had just finished making enchiladas, and they were there visiting, having dinner, and I was called to come to eat, and I walked over to the kitchen to come and eat. And as I walked into the kitchen, in the moment, I didn't even think it. It just I stopped, and it felt like something just came out of my mouth, but I wasn't in control of what was coming out of my mouth. And I said, the lights are about to go off. The power is about to go off. And my mom is very superstitious, and my aunt is also superstitious, Hispanic Catholic family. And she was like, don't say that, don't say that. Because, you know, when you say something, it's like putting a hex on something or whatever. And within seconds of them saying that, the power in the entire house went out. And not only that, but the power in the block went out, because a breaker, like a some thing down the street and the poles went out, it broke, and then the whole neighborhood was black, and they didn't know how to react to that. My cousin Jennifer thought it was super cool, and she was like, how did you do that? How did you do that? And I was like, I didn't do that, I just said it. After that, it got me to really wonder what this was, and to question a whole lot of things. And that's when I started going to my library at school and finding all of the supernatural and the spiritual, or the metaphysical books that I could find. ESP, anything that was tied to it, I wanted to find it and understand it. And that's when I started to really dive into it and try to read as much as I could about it to understand what was happening to me, because I didn't know what was happening.
Is there one book? I'm gonna go back to how your family reacted, but I want to quickly ask: is there one book that you can name that just sticks out to you as being the most impactful in your journey?
hmm It's the very first book that really helped me understand this from a bigger perspective. And it's the one that I've related to the most. And it was Sylvia Brown's book, The Other Side and Back, our guide to our a psychic's guide to our world and beyond. So, and she had promoted it on Montel, because I remember seeing her on Montel, and I saw that book, and I'm like, I have to buy that book. And I was still building up enough, I didn't work. I was still a kid. So I had to save up for that book. And then I ordered it on Amazon. It was the first time that Amazon was starting to make its presence known online. So I was able to order it on Amazon. It came, and I loved it. I still have the book to this day.
And with your family, it sounds like you said your mother and your grandmother were very superstitious. Your cousin was cool with it, but overall, in your environment that you grew up in, whether family or other parts of your environment growing up, what was the reaction response to these moments when they happened and when you let them be known to those around you?
Yeah, I think I didn't really share a lot of this with my family in those beginning stages. I actually kept it to myself. I mean, I hadn't even come out yet. I didn't even realize I was gay. So for myself, it was like, I mean, what's worse? You're a witch, or this like demonic person, or you're like homosexual. Like,
I
what's
always
worse?
I always joke that I'm
Yeah.
double whammy today. That's
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I tell people, I always tell people, look, I am the epitome of the list of everything that I should be stoned for. I was born out of wedlock. I'm psychic. I'm a medium. I'm also gay as well. So all these different things that you should be stoned for. I'm it, and then some. So I'm like, yeah. I didn't share it. It took me a while to share that. I actually didn't start really giving my family a taste of that until probably maybe 10 years ago. So this was years later. I think the only person that really knew I was doing this was my mom, because I was doing readings for people when I was later in my teenage years. I was doing free readings for people at that time, and people were just calling our house like crazy on our landline. And she didn't know who. It's like, why are all these people calling you? And I was like, because they want readings. And I gave a reading to one person, and they told another person, and now I have all these people calling me. So that's when I think my mom caught on, like something else was different. Everybody else in the family didn't really know to what extent I was really diving into this. And it wasn't until I professionally started doing this that a bulk of my family realized that this is what I was doing. And then some of them have come back and said, hey, I'm hearing about you from people who've gone to you for readings that I know. And, so that's pretty cool, because it validates it from a completely different angle. People don't, in your family or people close to you, don't typically take you as seriously unless they hear it from an outside source. And so when that's happening, that's pretty cool.
Do you feel like, have you experienced people kind of coming out of the woodwork that, like, once you became more open about these abilities you have, people come up to you and you're like, I didn't expect them to be open about this too, or to be curious about it. But because you became open about it, other people approached you more.
Mm. I, yes and no. I think people are still very cautious about it, and it's kind of scary for some people, especially when they see it happen or they see things occur. Um, there are still a lot of people who don't talk to me about this, and still to this day are not very open to even connecting with me because they're afraid of me. I'm like, I don't understand why, but that's okay. But for the most part, majority of my family are pretty much on board with what I do for a living, and they've seen the level of success that I've been able to achieve. And then not only that, but they see how I am in real life and how I'm not this dark or evil person. I'm actually a pretty decent human being, and I'm going to treat you with respect and dignity. Unless you come for me, then that's a different story. But most of them have seen that, and so for themselves, because they are more open to it now, just seeing what I've been able to do, they are actually starting to open up their own abilities. And it's a quite often phenomenon when I give someone a reading who is very skeptical at first, and then they see it happen and they have the session, and they're like, there's just no way he could have known that much information. And then they start having psychic abilities right after, and like, what's going on? I don't know what's happening. I'm like, well, what happened was you didn't think this was possible. Your reality, your ideas about what was possible for you were broken the moment you had a reading, and it left you open to more. And so in that moment, your abilities were triggered, and now you're able to start to use them in some way.
I love that. And I love that is part of your mission of why you do what you do, because I feel like that is a responsibility we have, is to show other people this is possible and that they can access it too
Mm.
in their own way. Now, delving into another question regarding your family, you're very open about, and you describe the experiences you had growing up, some moments of instability, obstacles. How do you feel those experiences growing up, how they've informed your practice as a psychic medium and a teacher?
Mhm. It's the sense of of empathy for other people and just caring about human beings in general. I think I grew up in such a tumultuous environment. I mean, I was constantly teased by kids at school. I was a pariah. I mean, I couldn't sit with the girls, couldn't sit with the boys, didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Even family members would tease me and would treat me badly. I mean, I remember because I was the sensitive boy in a Hispanic culture. You know, some of my male cousins, they didn't want their kids around me because they thought I was going to molest their kids or I was going to do something for them. And I remember in one incident, I was in a room with a few of my younger nieces and nephews, and they were like, 3, 2 years old, and I was just sitting there sketching and drawing a picture of an angel because I felt like doing it, and I was making it for them. And then one of my cousins barged into the room because he thought I was in there molesting them, and realized I was just sitting here drawing a picture of an angel. So people have these ideas about me, and growing up, I went through so much trauma that being very sensitive and being very emotionally um, open has allowed me to have a lot of empathy for other people and to want to help as much as possible. But also, it has helped me to feel even more empowered because it is that sensitivity that has helped to trigger further development with my abilities. Because there is a level you have to tap into your emotional side. And if you're not connected to your emotional centers and your creative centers, but your emotional centers the most, you're missing a huge opportunity to connect with energy. So, emotional sensitivity, emotional flexibility, elasticity is key to really taking this to the next level. And coping with the bullying, coping with the abusive stepfather, coping with all of the different scenarios that I had to deal with just made me more. It allowed me to have empathy and to pay attention to the little details and to the little things that were happening around me and made me ultra sensitive.
Thank you for sharing that and for continuing to be open about that. And I asked you, how the experiences have influenced your practice. I'm also curious, do you feel like your practice being a practicing medium, has influenced the healing process with those experiences?
Yeah, I used to believe because when I jumped on the spiritual bandwagon, we all have to be perfectly healed and we all have to be this like in tune, in sync spiritual beings and people who don't err, don't make mistakes, are not allowed to make mistakes. You're not allowed to. And I bought into a lot of that hype earlier on. And I spent a lot of time trying to turn myself into a version of myself that did not feel adequate or
Mm,
appropriate for the experiences I had lived. And in a way, I kind of feel like trying to heal, or in some instances, people think that that means to erase or to no longer even be, even to connect with that energy, even in memory form. I feel like that this is a service to the life that I lived, because there, I believe that everything does happen for a reason. I just don't stop there. I'm like, okay, what's the reason? Because I want to know. I need to know what the reason is, why this happened or why I went through this. So I actually dig deeper, and I dig further, and I try to find something that can be used out of that dark period. So anything that I've gone through, even today, anytime I'm dealing with a situation that is painful or difficult, or there's some form of suffering or struggle that I have to endure from it, I may, in the moment, give myself over to that experience and just let myself feel through it. And then once I'm able to come out of it, look back on that and say, hey, what can I take away from that? How can I use that and apply it to my life and to other people's lives in a way where I can make a difference and help them to get back into their own power and to embrace the fullness of who they are, because they're not broken, and you don't have to heal everything. You can use it to your advantage. If you get triggered easily by seeing someone mistreat their child because you were also mistreated as a child, use that constructively. Go and be a part of a nonprofit organization or work for the government and help to bring, support and services to kids who are in those situations. You don't need to heal it. You will be healed over a lifetime of working on that thing. So
mm.
for me, it's not even about being completely healed. It's about coming to a place of acceptance and peace about it, but letting that energy trigger you into action and constructive change.
So important. And again, thank you for sharing that. I felt every word you said there, and I think that's something that really pulled me towards you on Instagram when we connected recently in the past few months, is that you're so genuine and you're so straightforward. And it's very rare to find. And I feel like we need more of that in this realm of work that we do. Um
Mm.
and so actually, with Instagram and the rise of social media, how do you feel that has, I'm like, on the topic of being genuine and real, and not trying to pretend that we're all living on mountaintops doing yoga poses. No, I love yoga, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong. But
Mhm.
like namaste every day, all the way, 24/7, perfection. How do you feel social media has either helped to perpetuate that idea or to challenge it?
It has produced a generation of people who believe that you don't have to do the work. You just have to maintain the belief, even if it's not supported by your the investment of your energy and of your behavior and actions. You can believe something, but you don't technically. It's almost like takes me back to Catholicism and being a Catholic. And being a Catholic, you can call yourself a Catholic, and by definition and by title, you're good. But if you don't practice it, that's okay, because you can go and you can spill your beans to to the priest. And it's the same thing with mainstream Christianity at this point. You can believe what you want to believe, but you don't have to follow through with inspired action and indeed. And that doesn't connect for me. And I think that was part of the process of me trying to change not only my faith and my spirituality, because this is where my spirituality came from, is wondering and questioning everything. Why was I gay? What's the point of me being this way? I wouldn't choose to be this way. This is not a lifestyle choice. This is who I am. And in accepting that, then learning to accept myself from a perspective of being a human being, being a psychic and a medium and spiritual teacher, I've learned to embrace the darkness that becomes a part of who we are based on our experiences. But instead of letting it override our behavior, override who we choose to be, taking that and using it constructively in a positive way. And I think that in this world now, people are lazy. They're lazy as shit. They don't put it in the work. If I just click this 222 meme, I'm gonna get like some reward next week. If I'm woke, I'm woke. I'm like, this, the woke word was ours on the spiritual side decades ago. Now it's being used in a completely different way. So people are just spinning information and aligning it and morphing it into what they need to validate themselves and their positions and their ignorance or their bigotry or just their lack of understanding, instead of doing the work and trying to know themselves, trying to realize, hey, you can't call yourself this and then not follow up with inspired action. You can't call yourself a Catholic and not spend time feeding the poor or helping those who are less fortunate. That is a huge belief and rule to live by. So I try to kind of change it around, and I'm trying to do this with the psychic industry as well, with this industry in general, psychics and mediums and spiritual practitioners. This is not life is not love and light. Life is hard. It's difficult, and suffering is the thread that holds it all together, and we connect through our suffering. But there's a part of us inside that is built on love and is based in love. And if we get too caught up in the darkness, we forget that and we turn on ourselves and we turn on each other. If we remember that and we embrace that reality, then we can use it in a very positive way. So with psychics and mediums and spiritual practitioners, there's a lot of this, because I'm this, I'm not subject to human law, the human law of suffering, the human law of conditionality, the human law of circumstances and such. Okay, but you're still dealing with it. You're still, yeah, I remember, and this is a perfect example. I had a friend who very much love and light, everything's love and light. Okay, great. All right, calm down, Glenda. And when COVID hit, and you're seeing a pattern around the world of people becoming ill or struggling and suffering from something that is happening. You may not have all the answers, but people's experiences are validating that something is wrong and that we need to be careful and cautious and to do whatever we can to help ourselves through this. And so instead of ignoring the reality of what was happening, she decided to just believe in faith and love and light. Oh, if we just love and light, if we just believe that place yourself in a bubble of protection, you're not going to get sick. It's all going to go around you. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, ma'am. This is reality. Like, we're all subject to human law. I mean, Jesus was crucified on the cross, and he supposedly was the embodiment of God. So you can be affected.
That's a
You're not above it.
wonderful example. That's
Yeah.
a great example to use. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. So it's like, so we are subject to human law, the law of suffering. So you need to do whatever you can that is within practical means to just protect yourself and your family, because you have family that you're responsible for, and you need to make sure they're okay. And your faith does not supersede the basic fundamental need to be a parent protecting your children. So do that first and then apply your faith. Didn't listen, kept spewing the same, BS, love and light. 1 week later, texting me, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. My husband's collapsed. He's on the floor. I don't know if he's dead or alive. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. I'm like, take him to the doctor, take him to the hospital, call 911. Like, you're not going to be able to heal him from this physical condition. Act appropriately, like take him to the hospital, which she did, and he recovered. But and still, and I think she's had COVID like 3 or 4 times now. But it's like, seriously, like, just basics. It's the basics. So when it comes to faith, when it comes to spirituality, it should reinforce basic human behavior and standards for protecting yourself, protecting those around you, and treating each other with respect and dignity. And that it comes down to that. And there's a lot of people online who don't want to do the basics, and for them that's too much work. So they would rather just click on a meme or produce a channel that gets a lot of followers but doesn't have substance to it. And it's not helping anyone. It's not helping people to achieve what's possible for them.
Agreed. And I think there is a verse in the Bible. I remember this line growing up. I went to Catholic school. I went to a Protestant high school. I best of both worlds as a closeted gay kid. But I remember there was this one line I heard repeated. I think it's in the Bible. Faith without works is dead. And that's what I live
Mm,
by that. I mean, we could have all the faith in the world, but I believe we're like co-creators of what I call God or whatever we want to call it, source. We're co-creators with it. We don't work alone, and it doesn't work alone. We have to work with it.
mhm,
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of performativity on social media. And when it comes to, yeah, if we were meant to live above humanity, we wouldn't be born into humanity. So why are we trying to
mhm,
escape it? Totally
right.
agree. So I would love to ask you about your predictions. I am particularly excited to ask you about this. And just so listeners know, on Ferny's website, he lists predictions he's made, and over 80% of the predictions listed have been accurate, which is really incredible. So, out of all the predictions that you've made, which one of them has had the most impact on you? Has been the most memorable that you've done?
Hmm. Well, when it comes to predicting and sensing the future or what's to come, there's me actively and intentionally psychically predicting it, meaning I'm tuning in and trying to understand the circumstances of a future event or situation. And then there's these dreams that have become prophecies that have been a very new form of sensing that I just didn't understand at first. And when I'm sensing something psychically, it's easier to make sense of it in the moment because I'm conscious, I'm aware. But in dream state, everything is symbolic, and most of the the natural language of spirit and of energy is symbolism, because symbolism is just a representation of information and energy. And in dream form, our subconscious or our higher selves or whatnot, we are always connected. I mean, if you think of it this way, we're all connected energetically to each other. We're like a network of energy, and if something is happening within the consciousness of the collective or of people, it's going to ripple, and it's going to begin to send out waves, and it will happen months, weeks, years before it ends up occurring. If you're sensitive enough, you'll pick up on it early enough. But usually, people aren't aware until maybe a few days prior, because most people aren't trained or conditioned to pay attention and understand that they're always engaging with energy no matter what. So one of the dreams that I had, and I didn't really understand prophecy work to begin with. I mean, you hear about some of the prophets in the Bible. You hear about all of these individuals. Nostradamus, one of the more famous ones, which I still to this day do not understand why this guy got so much credit, because you can apply his words to a lot of different things, and I'm like, why are you being vague? Like, just spit it out and get to it. Like, who are you? What is this in reference to? Because this could mean a whole lot of things. And he didn't have anyone there to check him. So, and he was definitely trying to support himself through his works, and he needed to make his money. So he did what he needed to do. But with one of my predictions or prophecies, in my dream, I was someone else. I was actually a black male in this stream, and a bunch of people were marching, and it reminded me very much. It gave me that sense of like the civil rights movement, and how black people were marching for equality, marching to be understood, to be taken. We're human. We belong here. We deserve to be treated like a human being, and trying to empower themselves and break the box that they were placed in. So I was this black male marching with other black people, and we were marching collectively, and it was very much like that. And we were marching towards the White House, and the Capitol, and there were walls and fences up, and the front of the lawn of the White House looked like a war zone. I mean, it just didn't look like what we know it to be today. And we knew that we needed to get Donald Trump out of office. And Donald Trump was there. He was on the top of the White House with two Marines who had their assault rifles. And we knew we needed to get him out because he was a threat to our safety and to the stability of the country. So a bunch of us started climbing over the fences and started to make our way towards the building. And Trump at the top of the building, he had lost his position. So he apparently in the dream he had lost his position. He was no longer in power, but was still maintaining that role and would not let it go. And we knew we needed to get him out because it was time for him to leave, and he wasn't supposed to be there anymore. So we had a right to get him out. And as soon as we started running across the lawn and across all these obstacles in the lawn, he was telling the Marines, shoot them, like point and shoot them. And they looked at each other because they could not believe that they were being asked to shoot American citizens, and they were caught off guard because they were not prepared to act on his behalf in this way. It was kind of against what they were trained to do. And Trump also had his own people, which I would assume is MAGA. They were also present, but they were his acting force. But what he did is he took one of the guns out of the Marine's hands, he pointed it at the crowd and started to shoot. And it just started this whole catastrophic event. And there was all of this shooting and fighting and so forth. It was a crazy dream, and there was a lot more to it. I think after the fact, I had received a shot in my fingers, and when I looked down at my fingers in the dream, there was a stone there that was it was like a coal piece of dark black coal, and then in time it turned into a diamond. So it was just really interesting of the
Hmm.
symbolism in it. But there was also another scene where I, as a black man, had the next day gone to work. I was a server at a restaurant, and everybody was sitting outside. The tables were all spread apart like 6 feet, and everybody was eating as if nothing had happened. They didn't think it was a big deal. They didn't even believe that it was an actual attack, or it was any kind of like, they just believed that the whole thing was made up and that people were lying and it didn't really occur. And I was there, and I was like, no, it happened. This was real. But suffice it to say, fast forward, I wake up and I'm like, what the hell was that about? And I had no idea what this dream was about because there was so much symbolism. And it was one of the very first dreams, the symbolic dreams that I've ever had, where it caused me to have to question the way I perceive things from a psychic perspective, because I'm used to just tuning in and picking up on details, formulating an idea around what I think is going to happen, and then giving that to my client. I'm not used to dealing with that much symbolism that is so integrated that it just seems like a clusterfuck of information that doesn't seem to make any sense. So I had to break it up, break it down, break it apart, and try to understand the different components and the pieces. And I made a prediction when I was awake, and I posted it on social media. And this was it was in March of 20, I think it's 2019. I think I made the prediction in March of 2019, because that's when I had the dream. And my prediction was that there would be an attack on the Capitol. There would also be marches or some sort of like, terroristic type of vibe, and I went into some detail about it. And then fast forward, we get to January 6th, and there's an attack on the Capitol and all of these other details. That was before the Black Lives Matter marches. That was
Hmm.
before the attack on the Capitol. That was before he had asked the military to shoot the protesters outside of the White House because they were blocking his way to the church where he wanted to take his very special picture. So there was all these things that ended up coming out after the fact. And I was like, I was picking up on all of this like 2 years before it even started to show up. So that was pretty incredible. But it got me to realize that some of what I'm experiencing now and my abilities are changing. And I can still do my psychic work, but now I'm having these prophetic dreams and I'm having more of them. And when something is coming up, it's happening more often and it's closer in time frame to when it will occur. And I noticed also that when it's almost like they're giving me a time frame for when this will happen, because there was another dream 2 weeks before that dream. I'm sorry, 2 weeks after that dream, there was another dream where there was these two llamas that had gotten free and they were running around a town and they were just causing a ruckus. And then there was a woman who was there was a white vehicle that's flipped over. These two kids died in a vehicle. That was another separate dream in that same time frame. So that was just another weird one, and I posted that one as well. Well, 2 weeks before the Trump incident and the Capitol attacks and everything, there was an incident and I think it was in New York or up there somewhere, where two llamas got free and they were running around the town and it was causing a big old ruckus. And then within that same week, there was another event in California where this well-known woman who was I guess I think she was a politician or she was very connected. She got into a vehicular incident in her white SUV and killed two boys. So all of these things were coming out on the headlines around the same time, and then 2 weeks later, then there was the attacks, and I was like, I get it. I understand now how this is all integrated and how it makes sense to me. But it's taken me a long time to figure that out.
Wow. And what does it feel like when you receive something prophetic like that or a prediction? And because I've heard it said that when you get a vision and there is a lot of emotion, like your own emotion tied to it, that's when it's important to take it with a grain of salt. But when something comes and it
Mm,
feels like fact, just like neutral, almost like the voice that told you go to the kitchen, or
hmm
practice setting out a fire or saving yourself from a fire. That's that very factual, matter of fact. So anyways, what I'm trying to get at, what does it feel like for you when you get a prediction, and when do you know? or what do you tell people you teach or that you mentor when they ask like when do I know that it's my fear setting up a vision in my head or it's an actual prediction or an intuitive gut feeling?
Well, emotions are a critical component to taking your abilities to the next level. I disagree with the idea that you need to not allow your emotions to be part of the equation. I actually embody and embrace the idea of emotions because being an empath, that's where it all started. It was my emotional connection to things. So I allow my emotions to be used as a tool to trigger or create an intentional connection with what I'm trying to sense or figure out. When I've had a dream like that, granted, I have my own opinions and my own beliefs and my own perspective politically, and it's from the perspective of I'm not for Trump. I'm not for any of those things. I'm very much against a lot of the issues around that. But and so my own desire to want to know what's going to happen it can actually get in the way of me sensing accurately. And this is something that I teach with my students, that you have to maintain an objectivity because you do have to keep a bit of a detachment from the outcome. Use your emotions as a way to tap into something deeper, but don't come from a place of, you know, this is what's going to happen because it's like what happened with Hillary. All these psychics got that so wrong and were like, Hillary's going to win. Everybody was like, Hillary's going to win. And I wanted her to win too. I wanted her to win because I was ready for something different and I was not going to vote for this man. Well, everybody was saying that she was going to win, and I saw so many psychics predicting their making their predictions, and then afterwards taking other videos because they were wrong. I actually had a dream about that as well, but I didn't understand it at the time because it was so convoluted. But I didn't think she would win, and I thought that would be a little bit of a different situation altogether. But I used my emotion as a way to kind of motivate my intent to connect deeper. It's when you care about the outcome where you get into trouble. But when you're dealing with a dream, it's a whole nother level because you don't have control of what you're thinking when you're asleep.
Hmm.
You're either, your dreams are either motivated by your own personal experiences or they're motivated by information and energy. And whenever it's a prophetic dream, it has never happened from my perspective. It has always occurred from the perspective of the person who is going through it and experiencing that situation. So in the dream, if I'm having a prophetic dream and it seems like it's a lot of symbolism, if it's not me seeing it, if it's someone else's eyes and someone else's experience, I take it more literally and direct versus if it's a dream where I'm the one having the experience and I'm having an emotional reaction to something. That's a different story. So that's kind of how the way I differentiate that. And when I'm tuning into my clients, I care about people. I want to help people. I love people, but I don't have an invested interest in what's going to happen in their lives. So I can maintain that disconnect. But it's taken a lot of time to condition myself to kind of remove myself from caring about wanting to change the outcome and just accepting whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So it's a fine tuning, but you have to embrace your emotions, not negate them.
Got it. I think that's a very fair point. And from what I've seen, a lot of people in this realm of work tend to prefer not to be open about when they're inaccurate. And the fact that you're open about it, I think makes you even that much more genuine. So I want to ask you, what does it mean for you when something doesn't come out as accurate as you expected it to?
Yeah, I, if I'm going to take my abilities seriously and if I'm really going to push myself to the furthest I can develop it, I have to accept that I'm going to be human and I'm going to get things wrong because it is those mistakes that will teach me how to refine and tune myself further. I pay extra close attention to my mistakes. Why did I get that wrong? Why did I say that way? Why did I think that was what that meant? And I examine it and I try to figure it out. I don't just say, "Oh, I said this, and if it doesn't happen, I must not be psychic," or I'm going to look bad in front of the audience. No, because it's like any athlete. If you want to really get good at your activity, at whatever it is that you do, you're going to have to also know that some days you're going to have an off day. Some days you're going to make a mistake. Some days the team is going to come for you because you cost them the championship. It's going to be the case. And most people in this world who do incredible things also make incredible mistakes, but they learn from their mistakes and they push themselves past that. So I've made a lot of mistakes in predicting, but I've also exceeded the I've exceeded my expectations for how accurately I could get with my ability. And I've been able to achieve more accuracy in such precise ways that a skeptic is going to have a really hard time trying to negate me and dismiss what I'm able to do. They can fixate on a mistaken prediction, but I'm not hiding that. I'm not keeping that from the public. I'm like, look, this is what I said. This is what I thought in the moment. I was wrong. I still don't get the points because I obviously was incorrect in the way I thought that would turn out. But it's about helping others like yourself, helping everyone who wants to build themselves up to see that it's okay to make a mistake. You're going to make them, but that's okay. Just keep going. Learn from what you did, for what you did wrong. Tweak it. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, and this goes back to the point we were talking about that you brought up about not perpetuating this persona or this idea of being perfect all the time, or like we're these
Mhm.
always in tune, perfectly in tune people. And I mean, this is a debatable idea, but like I like these are not superpowers; they're abilities, and they're
Mm.
strong
Right.
abilities. And even with abilities and talent, we can make mistakes, and that's okay. And I have seen actually on Instagram people call these superpowers. And listen, I love the word superpower. I do believe they are superpowers, but not in the way that people when we say that, I feel like it makes people believe that we're like these elevated beings. And again, going back to we are not above humanity. We are humans having spiritual or spirit souls having spiritual bleh, souls having human experiences and humans having spiritual experiences. We're not
Hmm.
above it. So yeah, I these are abilities. And I love what you said. I say that all the time that even the most talented person makes mistakes in any other kind of work in this human universe world.
When it's about the standards and expectations. Uh, People still watch the weather every day. How often do the weathermen get it right, or weather women get it right? How often do meteorologists get it wrong? They have a track record of getting it wrong, but we still rely on that. We still depend on it because it does help and it does make it easier for us to do what we have to do as a civilization. Same thing with doctors. Doctors do not heal and correct every issue that someone may have. They will get things wrong, or they will misdiagnose, or they will miss something because they're humans. And so I think this expectation and standard that psychics are supposed to know all and see all and not get anything wrong, because if they get it wrong, then they're not psychic. And what I say is no, that standard, that expectation is flawed, it's incorrect, and it does not line up with the human experience and condition. And you have to apply the same standards and the same expectations to the psychic industry as well. Granted, there's a lot of crappy psychics and mediums out there, and there's definitely a lot of con artists and frauds that are doing this work. And we tend to get lumped in with them because we also feed into the hype. I remember once watching a segment of Sylvia Brown, and she was on one of these older shows back in the 80s, and they were like, it's like everything. And she was giving herself props, but she was feeding into the hype, and everyone watching that was also going to believe you're supposed to know everything, and just perpetuating the standard. And it's not beneficial for any of us. And I believe personally that having access to these abilities, this capacity, because it is something that belongs to all of us and we all can use it, we can do it. Having the ability to tap into this is a way for us to further evolve as sentient beings in form, and to be able to connect with each other in a much more deep and profound way. But if we keep sustaining the status quo and perpetuating stereotypes, it's not gonna change. Nothing is gonna happen. And so my job, my mission, is to shatter that standard, and to be the and exemplify it and say, nope, this is not how it works. This is actually how it works. And people say, no, well, you're just, you're scapegoating or you're trying to come up with excuses. I'm like, I'm not coming up with excuses. I'm telling you how this works. So do you say to a meteorologist, well, you didn't get that prediction right about the weather yesterday. So, you're coming up with excuses because the patterns changed. No, like you have to understand this. And once you understand it, then you're better able to control and to use it to your advantage. And it's accessible to all of us. And even the skeptics have abilities. They're just too ignorant and stupid to understand that because they're caught up in what they're trying to do, which is to try to elevate themselves and to try to make themselves out to be this special person. Even James Randi, one of the biggest skeptics who was pursuing Sylvia and pursuing a lot of these others, he was a magician, and he actually had he had taken his husband, he had brought him to the country illegally, and then he wasn't being honest about the situation, and then he was forcing his lover to be a fraudulent psychic, to pretend to be a psychic, to trick people, so that way he could show the world how easily they're manipulated. But they made money off of that. He wasn't being honest about his husband's situation, and he was instead using him and making money off of it. So why should I have any respect for someone like that? Why should I even consider someone like that to even have a say in what this is? Because you're not helping to provide clarity or truth in the industry. You're just trying to get attention because you've got issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. It rubs me the wrong way when I see on, it's my personal opinion, when I see on Instagram, I'll come across a psychics page on Instagram, and it's just when there's a lot of the person. Well, listen, we should add our personality to the work we do, but I feel like we can tell when there's a lot of ego put into something, especially on places like Instagram. There's just so much of elevating themselves and not focusing so much on the work that they do, but more themselves. And I believe there are a lot of talented psychics and mediums out there who go about it the wrong way. They have the ability and they've developed it, but they make it so much about themselves and having a followership. There was one time this psychic medium that I was following, and we were a community that we were watching her lives, and we became this little community for a little while. And I wasn't going to tell the story at all, but I'll just tell it.
That's okay.
I felt extremely uncomfortable about the opinions she was expressing about medicine, advising people not to take a certain medical decision because it would be against their it would harm them. It was vaccines. She had an opinion about vaccines, and listen, I'm vaccinated against COVID. I believe we all should be. If you don't want to be, fine, but take the precaution that you should for your community. And if you're not going to do that either, not my kind of people personally, but she was telling people do not get vaccinated because there is a government tracker device in the vaccines. And it's like, you know what? You can have your opinion, but you're not a medical professional. If you were a medical professional telling people not to get vaccinated, I wouldn't like it, but you're in medicine, and she isn't. So I decided to disconnect from her, and then it became this I was ousted from the community. I was no longer having her protection. That's what she said. And I feel like I've come across that. That's something that's personally happened to me, but I feel like I do come across that a lot on social media, where people build these kind of clans around the work they do, but it becomes more about them being a leader of a clan or community rather than let's focus on what the other side has to say, or let's focus on the healing that happens. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what came up for me as you were sharing. There's just not a lot of genuine approach on social media, but it's people like you. I'm not here just fluffing your feathers. It's people like you who really stick out. That's why I followed you, because you're just so genuine, and the fact you're honest about the mistakes, the inaccuracies, I think makes you even more accurate, if that makes sense. It just makes you even more reliable, I mean to say. Yeah.
Consistency, right? Consistency.
About consistency and being real and being honest, because I mean, fine if people want 100,000 followers because they put a bunch of fluff on their Instagram, power to them, but is it really changing anything? Like you said, is it really doing anything? And so what for someone who is discovering, or what I like to say, rediscovering their mediumship or psychic abilities and just starting out, what advice would you give to somebody who is in that phase?
Yeah, I think there's three things that I would suggest for anyone who's trying to really push themselves. The first thing is don't believe Hollywood about how this works or what, because that's just hype. That's just let's make money on something that can get your attention, or that's like, gonna be made out to be something other than what it is. So I wouldn't really believe Hollywood's version of how this works. I would try to explore this within yourself. Everybody has this. Everybody can do this. You don't have to be, you don't have to an angel doesn't have to descend from the heavens and says, "Oh, I've brought you your abilities. Now you have them." No, you don't need any of that. You were born with these, they're there. Accept, embrace, and start to practice using them. To practice using them, all that requires is your brain power and understanding the mechanisms of your mind, understanding thought, understanding emotion, understanding energy exchanges. You don't need tools. I used to be stuck in a perpetual loop where I would go to a metaphysical bookstore like on a regular basis. I would buy either a crystal or a tarot deck or a book, and I felt like this is
Pointing
going
to
to be the flow.
myself.
Yeah, yeah. You spend a lot of money that way, right? You could be investing that money and actually building a business around this. But I spent a lot of money buying stuff that I thought were going to be the trigger. The thing that was going to cause this to switch on, because I did spend many years not having my ability because I turned away from it, and I didn't have a backbone to deal with people who just weren't going to be able to take the information, and I shut it down, and I was pretty much disconnected from my ability for like 10 to 15 years. So it took me a long time to get it to work again, but it was always working. I just didn't realize it was working because of the beliefs I held around how this is supposed to work. I mean, I was blocking myself. So you don't need tools. You don't need a tarot deck. They're great to start to begin the process. And some people have a passion for tarot, which is fine. No one's saying you can't have a passion for this. You can't, no one's saying you can't have a passion for crystals, but you don't need that to be psychic. Psychic is a mental ability. It is not a power that you're granted by a tool. So you can use your tools as starting points, but ultimately you just have to understand the mechanisms of your mind and then start to use that to your advantage. I try as often as possible in my lives, and whenever I'm dealing with people in the public, to explain a little bit of this, a little bit of that, so that way they can start to figure it out in the moment, because I had to figure this out myself. So pay attention to what's going on in your brain, and you can do so through meditation or through just awareness exercises. You don't have to spend hours and hours a day meditating, because you can meditate for that long. That doesn't mean you're more psychic. It just means that you're meditating. That's it. But the process of meditation that should help you is just being self-aware of what's going on in your mind and in your thoughts, and then using that information and trying to make sense of it. So don't buy into the hype. You don't need tools. Use your brain, pay attention to what's going on in your mind, and then practice, practice, practice. Stop waiting for someone to say, "Hey, you're supposed to be a psychic or medium." Stop waiting for someone to grant you or give you permission to be. You have it within you. It's a birthright. So start practicing it. Get yourself a journal. And then if you're watching something on TV and you have an idea that pops into your head about it, ask yourself, well, what do I think about that? And then write down what you're feeling about it, and maybe something that you think is going to happen next, and date it, and then so forth. And then on and on and on. If you're into watching the housewives of whatever and you have ideas or opinions about what's going to happen in the future with some of their dynamics, write it down and date it. But start getting into the habit of trying to sense and figure out what is happening in your mind, and what that means about the circumstances that you're engaging with. Practice. You have to practice. Linda Ronstadt was on, I think she was on Good Morning America, and they asked her, like, what do you think for people who want to be a musician? And she says, practice. Most people have great, they have great singing talent, but they don't practice and they don't ever get good with it. She says, I spent 6 or 7 hours a day just practicing singing when I wasn't singing on stage. So it requires a constant use to be able to build that muscle up and to get better and better and better. I do have a free course on my website. Actually, if you go to fernandomarron.com, you go down to classes and all of that. There's a free course on YouTube that I put together. It took me a long time to put this course together. Initially, I wanted to make it so that people could buy it, but I didn't feel like I was reaching enough people through that process. And I was like, screw it, I'm making it free. Everybody can get it. So I made it free. Everybody can get it. It breaks all of the basics down, not from a mythical or mystical mindset, like, oh, you have to connect with your guides and you have to communicate with your angels, and you don't need any of that. Like, it's great if you want to put more energy into that. You don't need any of that. All you have to do is just practice your abilities, but first you need to understand how they're working within your mind, so you can start to pay attention and then use it on a regular basis, and then you can build yourself up.
Absolutely. Love that. And for those interested, Fernie's name in the description of the podcast episode will be linked so you can go directly to his website. Yeah, that's such incredible, helpful insight that you just shared. And what is the one thing you wish people knew about what you do?
It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work and a lot of energy. Every it's think of a gynecologist. There's this thing where gynecologists don't really sleep with their wives. If they're male, they don't sleep with their wives because they're pretty much burnt out on staring at vaginas all day. So they don't really have a desire to engage with them after they're done working. And for myself, when I'm not working and I'm not taking appointments or I'm not doing the lives, the free lives, I'm talked out. I'm really talked out. And my family and my partner and the people in my life, they get the butt end of that because I am used up energetically and conversationally. So, this isn't work that is easy to do because you are going to be sensitive on a regular basis. You are not going to be able to handle being around a lot of people because it's just more energy that you have to engage with. And granted, there's really nothing separating you from energy that is across the country or whatnot, other than the awareness of it or the idea of it. But I couldn't live in Houston anymore, where I'm from. I had to leave because it was so busy. And even to this day, when I go back to Houston, within a few days, I start to feel the heaviness of the city and the energy and people's thoughts and ideas because they're focused on the things that are causing them suffering, their jobs, their relationships, all of these other things. So I have to be in a nature setting, which is where I'm at now. I'm kind of outside of a major city in nature because it helps to ground and keep my energy centered. So this work does take a toll on you. My memory is crap because I'm constantly channeling information and I don't have the luxury of holding on to something and keeping it in my mind for too long. I have to let it go and keep going and keep going, keep going. So it takes a toll on you. And it does take a lot of work to develop and do it in a way where you want to do it professionally and you want to do it effectively. So it's not for everybody, but it is a lot of work. And I wish people understood that because they see TV and they see shows and they think, oh, it's pretty easy. I'm like, no, this is a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. And if you want to do it for business, that's a whole nother ballgame. So it takes work.
Are you telling me it's not all love and light?
No,
I'm
love and
so
light, no.
disappointed.
No, no.
No, but it's true. It takes a lot of developing and being honest with yourself. And in my experience, and we touched on this a little bit earlier in this episode, for me personally, the more I develop my abilities, I feel like the more real I get with myself and what some people may call the shadow self, or like
Mm,
with trauma or with hangups or insecurities. So there's a personal journey. It's not just about giving for me giving people readings and helping them
mm,
heal. There's also a very personal journey that is attached to that. So it's not just restricted to what the other person receives through me from the other side or
mm.
from the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. There's a very personal journey there for me. Do you feel the same way for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think my desire to want to accept myself and to not see myself as a evil person or someone that was wrong or bad or broken or didn't belong here was one of the driving mechanisms for helping me to ask these bigger questions and to want to connect on a more profound level. And now when I see people going to others because they feel like they're not special enough to have a direct connection with nature or with God or with the universe, it breaks my heart because I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. You're more than what you know. You're more than what you remember. Don't buy into the disconnect. It's temporary. It hurts, but we're still here and we can be with each other and we can help each other. But don't dismiss the value you hold within the spectrum of creation.
How can people find out more about you and what you do?
hmm Simple. Just go to my website, fernandomarron.com. Everything's on there. It's pretty simple to navigate. It's connected to all of my social media, my YouTube channel, all of the videos that I have, the free articles with all of my prior predictions and all of my prophecies, and the classes that are available to people as well. I've got a book coming out, hopefully this year, if I can get my butt to finish it. And it's like the book I wish existed years ago because I could have like fast track this process a hell of a lot more. So I'm trying to give the goods away so people can just stop wasting time buying stuff that doesn't really make a difference for them. But go to my website, fernandomarron.com. Also I'm on all of the social media platforms, but specifically on Instagram and on TikTok, as long as they're relevant. Because once something else is more relevant, I'll be on there mostly. But Instagram and TikTok, Ferny ESP. So at Ferny FERNYESP is my handle. There are a lot of wannabe accounts out there who are frauding people and trying to make money off of them, and I try my best to let people know, like, website or Ferny ESP. That's it.
And you go live Wednesdays and Fridays, right?
Wednesdays and Fridays, I try to do at least 2 hours if I can manage it, because I usually do it on my right after my workday, because I'm already primed and conditioned and ready to go. So even though I'm tired, once I connect with the energy, it does charge me up a bit to be able to do it. But then you have a limit that you can hit. But I try to do it on the Wednesdays and Fridays on a regular basis.
And I want to plug those because they're really fun lives and your energy is great. And it's just so it's healing for me to watch other people receive messages, and it's so fun. So I highly recommend going on Fernie's lives on TikTok and Instagram. Well, thank you for joining us. And again, thank you for being real and genuine, being honest and sharing your experiences, being open about them. I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Really do.